Muslims often say the Quran proves that it came from God by issuing a challenge. Produce even one surah like it. But what does like it mean? Who sets the standard? And who decides whether anyone has succeeded? In Surah Yunus 10:38, Muhammad's opponents are told, "Produce one surah like it then, and seek help from whoever you can other than Allah if what you say is true." Surah Al-Isra 1788 makes an even greater claim. If all humans and jinn were to come together to produce the equivalent of this Quran, they could not produce its equal. Those are enormous claims. But before a challenge can prove something, we need to know what success would actually look like. For Muslims, the Quran is not simply a book placed on a table for literary examination. Its words are memorized, recited in prayer, heard from childhood, and received as the speech of Allah. Its sound and rhythm are part of Muslim devotion. That helps explain why the Quran's challenge feels far more powerful than an ordinary literary comparison. The Quran also emerged within an Arabic culture in which poetry was performed orally, preserved through memory and shaped by sophisticated rhetorical traditions. For Muslims, the claim is not merely that the Quran is beautiful. It is known as iʿjāz al-Quran, the inimitability of the Quran, the belief that the Quran possesses a miraculous quality no human composition can equal, and that this supports its divine origin and Muhammad's prophethood. That deserves to be taken seriously. The Christian response should not be to mock Arabic literature or casually dismiss the Quran as unimpressive. The real question is whether literary greatness can carry the weight sometimes placed upon it. The Quran repeats the challenge in several forms. Surah Hud 11:13 challenges Muhammad's opponents to produce 10 fabricated surahs like it. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:23 reduces the challenge to one. Produce a surah like it and call your helpers other than Allah, if what you say is true. But what exactly does like it require? Must a composition reproduce the Quran's rhythm, its vocabulary, its imagery, its relationship between sound and meaning, its theology, its emotional effect, or must it somehow equal all these qualities at once? Classical Arabic rhetoric does provide tools for discussing eloquence, structure, syntax, and meaning. So the problem is not that Muslims have no literary standards. The problem is that the challenge passages themselves do not provide a fixed pass or fail threshold. Classical Muslim theories have also not all located the miracle in exactly the same place. Some centered it in the Quran's language and discursive arrangement. Some argued that God prevented humanity from producing a successful response. Others connected inimitability to the singular event of revelation itself. That diversity does not prove the Quran can be imitated, but it does show that like it requires further definition. Before we ask whether someone has met the challenge, we need to know which understanding of the challenge is being tested. Imagine that an Arabic writer accepts the challenge. The writer produces a short composition with deliberate sound patterns, carefully selected words, powerful imagery, theological meaning, and a tightly constructed structure. What happens next? Who judges it? Muslim Quran scholars? Arabic literature professors? Poets? Linguists? Native Arabic speakers? And what determines the result? Must every expert agree? Is a majority enough? Would the composition be measured according to the Quran's own literary features? And how different is it permitted to be? A proposed answer faces a difficult problem. If it closely resembles the Quran, it may be rejected as imitation. If it differs too greatly, it may be rejected as incomparable. That does not mean Muslim scholars are dishonest. A Muslim may sincerely begin with the theological conviction that the Quran is the perfect speech of Allah and therefore cannot be equaled by human beings. But that conviction will naturally shape how every proposed answer is evaluated. If belief in the Quran's inimitability guarantees that every competitor must fail, then the judgment cannot independently prove the belief that produced it. For the challenge to function as public evidence, success must at least be recognizable in principle. Otherwise, the challenge may express what Muslims believe about the Quran without independently demonstrating that belief to someone outside Islam. A Muslim may respond, "You do not understand Arabic. You cannot judge what you cannot fully hear." There is truth in that objection. Translation cannot reproduce every sound, rhythm, association, ambiguity, or rhetorical feature of an Arabic text. Someone who does not understand Quranic Arabic should not casually declare its language unimpressive. Literary judgment is also not meaningless. Scholars can examine structure, vocabulary, syntax, imagery, sound, and the relationship between form and meaning. Experts can give informed reasons why one work is more sophisticated or powerful than another, but literary excellence is not the same as supernatural impossibility. Experts can explain why Shakespeare is extraordinary. They cannot demonstrate from literary quality alone that no human being could ever write a play of comparable greatness. There is a difference between saying the Quran is extraordinary literature. No human being has produced its equal. Therefore, the Quran came from God. Those claims may be connected, but they are not identical. Each step requires another argument. Literary excellence may contribute to a larger case for revelation, but it cannot, by itself, bridge the entire distance from "this is remarkable" to "therefore Gabriel delivered it to Muhammad." A Muslim may answer that the challenge was never intended to operate like a modern competition with judges, scorecards, and a technical rubric. They may also point to Muhammad's original audience. The Quran itself records opponents accusing him of invention and calling him a poet, a fortune teller, or a madman. Muslims argue that these Arabic-speaking contemporaries were well positioned to recognize the Quran's force, yet no proposed answer gained recognition as its equal. But attempted Quranic imitations have existed throughout Islamic history. The real issue is not whether anyone has ever tried, it is whether any attempt could be recognized as successful, and by what standard. The reactions of Muhammad's contemporaries may show that the Quran made a powerful impression. They do not reveal that every opponent privately recognized a supernatural literary miracle. And a universal claim cannot be established merely by saying that no accepted rival emerged in one historical setting. Surah Al-Isra, 1788, says that all humanity and the jinn together could not produce the Quran's equal. That is a claim about the limits of every created mind. It requires more than the historical observation that Muhammad's opponents did not displace his proclamation with a competing text. A Muslim may instead view the challenge as one sign within a much larger case for Islam. That case may include Muhammad's life, the Quran's message, its preservation, prophecy, influence, and the spiritual experience of its recitation. That is a more careful argument. If the literary challenge is one part of a cumulative case, then it should be evaluated as one part of that case. But it should not then be presented as a decisive public test that proves the Quran's divine origin by itself. A final response is that the challenge is theological. Because the Quran is Allah's speech, human beings cannot reproduce it. That position can be internally coherent, but it also means the Quran's divine origin is being used to explain why it is inimitable. The reasoning becomes, the Quran comes from Allah because it is inimitable, and it is inimitable because it comes from Allah. That may express Islamic faith. But it cannot independently prove Islam to someone trying to determine whether Islam is true. From a Christian perspective, literary power has never been the final test of revelation. The Bible warns that an impressive sign, persuasive messenger, or extraordinary spiritual claim cannot overturn what God has already revealed. The question is not merely whether a message is powerful, the question is whether it is true. Does it agree with God's previous revelation? Does it faithfully proclaim the identity and work of Jesus Christ? The Apostle Paul gives Christians a direct principle in Galatians 1:8. Even if an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preached to you, Paul then places such a messenger under God's curse. Paul was not speaking about Islam, which appeared centuries later. He was confronting rival messages in his own first-century context. But the principle is clear. A later claimed revelation cannot overturn the apostolic gospel simply because it comes with spiritual authority. That matters when considering Islam. The Quran appeared centuries after Jesus and the earliest Christian testimony. It presents a different account of Jesus' identity and denies that his enemies killed or crucified him. Those differences cannot be settled merely by declaring the Quran impossible to imitate. A later message does not overturn earlier revelation and historical testimony simply because its language is regarded as extraordinary. The truth of its claims must still be examined. Now grant the strongest possible conclusion. Suppose the Quran is the greatest work of Arabic literature ever produced. Suppose no surviving Arabic text equals its combination of sound, structure, brevity, theological force, and historical influence. That would establish that the Quran is an extraordinary book. It would establish that Muhammad's proclamation had remarkable literary and historical power. But literary supremacy cannot independently establish the Quran's account of God, Jesus, revelation, or history. Those claims require their own evidence. By the early to mid-50s, Paul was already passing on a tradition he said he had received: that Christ died for our sins, was buried, was raised on the third day, and appeared to witnesses. The same early Christian writings confess, Jesus is Lord, and describe Christ as giving himself for our sins. This testimony predates the Quran by centuries. The Quran later denies that Jesus was crucified and rejects Christian claims about his divine identity. Even if the Quran were universally recognized as the greatest Arabic text ever composed, literary greatness could not erase that earlier testimony. It could not prove that the earliest Christian proclamation was historically wrong. It could not demonstrate that the crucifixion did not occur, and it could not establish that the apostolic understanding of Jesus had been corrupted. A book's style cannot automatically verify every claim contained within it. Even a perfect poem could express false theology. Even the most beautiful speech could make an incorrect historical claim. And even a completely unique book could still be a human book. If you are Muslim, none of this requires you to deny that the Quran is beautiful or that its recitation has affected you deeply. The question is whether that experience can carry the weight of proving every claim the Quran makes, especially its claims about Jesus. Christianity also treasures a sacred text. Christians believe the Bible is inspired by God. But in Christianity, God's fullest self-revelation is not a text, it is a person. John 1:14 says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." The Word entered history. Jesus lived among us. He taught publicly. He was seen, heard, touched, opposed, arrested, and crucified. His followers then proclaimed that God raised him from the dead. Christianity does not ask the world to believe because no one can reproduce the literary style of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. The Gospel of John is distinctive. The Psalms are powerful. Paul's letters are deeply influential. But Christians do not say, produce a chapter like Romans, and if you fail, Christianity is true. The Christian claim is centered on what God did in history. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15:14, "And if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith." That statement has the possibility of failure built into it. Paul says Christianity stands or falls with whether Jesus rose from the dead. Historical investigation is not automatic or free from interpretation. Sources can be questioned, witnesses can be disputed, alternative explanations can be proposed. The event cannot be repeated in a laboratory, but the claim is historically identifiable. Jesus was either raised or he was not. Paul openly tells us what would make Christianity false. The Quran may be admired. Its Arabic may be powerful. Its structure may be sophisticated. Its recitation may deeply move those who hear it. But recognizing those qualities is not the same as demonstrating that no human being could ever produce anything comparable. What does like it mean? Who judges the result? And could success ever be recognized? Without clear answers, the challenge may express Islamic belief about the Quran, but it cannot independently establish that belief for everyone else. The Quran may be unique, but uniqueness is not divinity, and beauty is not revelation. The Christian faith does not rest on the claim that no one can imitate a sacred text. It rests on the claim that the Word became flesh, entered history, was crucified, and rose from the dead. So the final question is not merely whether anyone can produce a surah like the Quran. It is whether the Quran tells the truth about Jesus. Read it carefully. Read it in context. Then ask yourself, what is the truth? Subscribe to keep exploring the history, the texts, and the questions that matter. We'll follow the evidence, speak the truth in love, and keep the conversation going.